Plaintiff William Cook grew up in Detroit, and growing up, a lot of his friends ran with gangs. William always stayed on the straight and narrow, and he met the defendant when they became neighbors. However, William's suing him today for damaging his fence. Defendant Jimmy Stillwell was born in Detroit, and he went to college to study engineering and pursue a career in the automotive field. Jimmy insists he intended to fix the fence himself, but William sued him before he had a chance to.
Start with you.
Well, I'd just like to say for starters, Judge Mathis, that we're both from the Detroit area, and growing up, I was a pretty good kid, not much trouble, you know, and had
What high school did you go to?
John Glenn in Westland.
Yeah, by Wayne Memorial. Y'all used to play Wayne Memorial all the time.
Yes, sir. It used to be the Great Lakes 8, but it's not that anymore. I'm not sure what it is. But, you know, I had some friends, some older brothers they had that were in they were kind of bad people. They were in some gangs called the Pony Down Gang, which those guys were thugs.
So was I.
You were. I did not know that. And look at how you've turned yourself around. That's amazing.
I'm going to get in trouble. They're going to say, keep your name out my mouth. Everybody know y'all did 20 years each.
We're kind of bad people. They were in some gangs called the Pony Down Gang, which those guys were thugs.
So was I.
You were. I did not know that. And look at how you've turned yourself around. That's amazing.
I'm going to get in trouble. They're going to say, keep your name out my mouth. Everybody know y'all did 20 years each.
Plaintiff William Cook is suing the defendant for damaging his fence, but the defendant insists he intended to fix the fence, and William sued him before he had a chance to.
Go ahead.
I went to work for Northwest Airlines at Metro Airport, and I would see you come through. I'm not sure if it was Thursday or Friday evenings you would come through.
Come back on Friday.
Yeah, I've said hi to you a few times. I mean, we'd always see you come through, coming home, I believe, you know. So
I was coming from here.
Yeah, I believe, yep. And so, you know, that was a little bit of association. I've seen you before and got a lot of respect for you because you know, a lot of people don't turn themselves around. You know, I have friends that never did, and, you know, but to the case, I've owned my home for about 30 years and lived, you know, rented it out some, you know, lived there some. And my neighbor, Jimmy, next the defendant there, he moved in, and not a problem with Jimmy at all. Nice guy, don't have any trouble. But, you know, we had a little, he had some work done in his house, and they destroyed my fence. And
Okay, so before we get to the specifics, let me allow him to give some background, sir.
Sure. I was born in Detroit. My parents worked in the auto industry. They were employed at auto plants, and that allowed my parents to finance my college education. I went to Wayne State University, where I majored in industrial engineering, because my parents worked in auto plants, and I wanted to be an automotive engineer. The plants where my parents were employed, I used to spend my summer educations there. When I would go home from school in the summertime, I found that my father would see to it that I got a summer job in the auto plant where he and my mother were employed. And so I worked there every summer. I worked 3 college summers at that plant. This is before the auto industry started to downturn, and I realized that maybe
What years are you talking about?
Ooh. The 80s,
Okay.
the late 70s, the early 80s, when the auto industry started to face competition from the Japanese, and they started to lay people off. They started closing plants. They started moving plants abroad. It turned the industry inside out. Those of us who were majoring in fields.
No, it turned Detroit inside out.
Yes, the city and the suburbs. So for those
I like to make it clear what happened to Detroit, and you went right there. These corporations abandoned the city. The auto companies abandoned it. They went to Canada, and they went to Mexico where they can get cheaper parts made. Or they went to the South where there were no unions.
Exactly.
In fact, 300,000 jobs were lost over a 20-year period. Wow. That's 300,000 families. And so that's what happened to Detroit. It furthered when Clinton came along with the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Act. That's what everybody came down on. The presidential candidacy of his wife, the unions didn't support her much because they remembered her husband with that NAFTA agreement sent jobs to Canada in Mexico, and I know that many of the big auto unions did not endorse her, or some of the Democratic auto union members certainly didn't endorse her, because they attributed the losses of their jobs, the layoffs, the reduced salaries that they're getting when they lay them off and bring them back for less. And that's why she lost Michigan, most folks believe. But that's what happened, and I like to make that point clear, because everybody thinks Detroit just suddenly something exploded or came down. No, there was an explosion of abandonment by General Motors, Chrysler, and to a lesser extent, Ford. That's what happened to Detroit. All right, I gotta say that stuff because it is so important for us to know what happens in our community that is a result of government and corporate neglect. Go ahead now.
So as that was all happening, the effect that they had on me and my college education at the time was I realized that going into the automotive industry was probably not going to be the best thing for me. So as a result of all that going on, I also abandoned Michigan. I had the opportunity to transfer from Wayne State University to San Francisco State University, where I have friends in California who convinced me that I could probably have a better time of it in California. Yep. So that's what I did. When I was 23 years old, I moved from Detroit, or from Inkster, or from the suburbs of Detroit to San Francisco. And
you lived in Inkster?
Yes, I lived in the city of Inkster, graduated from Inkster High School. They destroyed my high school. It was dismantled. Yep. And I stayed in California from age 23 until I retired from my job 2 years ago at age 62.
Where did you work? What type of job?
I was a computer systems engineer, and I was in the banking industry.
And that's what we call a talent drain, meaning there's talented people in town who've gotten a college education and they leave because there's no opportunity there. There's no perception of opportunity. So you have a talent drain. So when auto industry or any other industry comes to town, you don't have the talent because you didn't prepare the people, because you abandoned them with the other jobs, so they left town. So you have no talent. All the jobs in the world can't help you if the people aren't prepared to work them. That's what we call a talent drain, meaning there's talented people in town who've gotten a college education and they leave because there's no opportunity there. So when auto industry or any other industry comes to town, you don't have the talent, so you have no talent. All the jobs in the world can't help you if the people aren't prepared to work them.
Plaintiff William Cook is suing the defendant for damaging his fence, but the defendant insists he intended to fix the fence, and William sued him before he had a chance to.
All right, sir, and tell me what happened with the fence here that we're talking about.
There was a tree between Jimmy's house and my house, and I had some limbs cut off of it because they were hanging over my house. And then about 10 days later, Jimmy had the whole tree removed. And which was fine with me. You know, it was right on the fence, smashing the fence and everything. So I was at work that day. I retired from the airlines, then I went to work for DTE, local power company there in Detroit. And so when I got home from work, the tree company was still at Jimmy's house. And I had noticed when I pulled in, the fence was smashed. And I have some pictures, pages 2 through about 9 are some photos of the damage. And so, like, Jimmy and I have never had a problem. Jimmy's a nice guy. You know, we've always gotten along. And I waited for him to come over and say something about it, and it never happened.
That's a lot of damage.
Well,
it looks bad.
Yes, sir. And I spoke with the fence company before they left. They were cleaning up, actually, when I got home from work. And the gentleman at the fence company told me, he said, well, I asked him, I said, well, what are you guys going to do about the fence? And he said, we spoke with the homeowner, and this is what he told me. We knocked $500 off of his tree job, and he said that he would repair the fence. And I told the man, I said, well, you know that's my fence. And he said, no, I didn't know that. So, I didn't really feel too bad about the tree company because they were told that it was Jimmy's fence. This is what they told me, Your Honor. Mm-hmm. So I waited till the next day, and I went over to Jimmy's house, and I asked him what he was going to do about the fence, and he said, well, he said word for word, well, Bill, they discounted my tree job, and he says, I see you're real handy over there, so I figured I'd go to Home Depot and buy the stuff, and you can fix it.
I got remember that one.
And I said, well, you know, linemen for DTE make $51.50 an hour, and it's going to be about 40 hours, so that's a couple thousand. Oh, no. So I asked him, I said, Jimmy, alls I would like is, and there's some evidence in there, some text between Jimmy and myself, Your Honor, and I said, listen, I just want a reputable fence company that will guarantee their work. And he said he was looking on Angie's List. I believe that's what it's called. And no offense to them, they probably could have done just as well a job as anyone else, but I don't think they'd be able to guarantee it. But that's all I wanted. And so he kept hem-hawing around, and finally I told him, I said, Jimmy, I'm going to go to the local court here, and I'm going to file because I want my fence fixed. And, you know, there might have been a couple heated arguments, no threats or anything like that, just, you know, a little anger about it. And I told him, I said, all you have to do is call a fence company. I had already called 4 and gotten 4 estimates, and you have the 1 estimate in there, Your Honor, and I took the least expensive estimate because, I mean, there was one up to $2,100, and I took the least expensive one because that company have been around the area for about 50 years, so I figured they would be reputable. And
let me get to him then.
Yes, sir.
And ask him about it, sir.
Yeah, okay. I hired a tree company to possibly reduce a tree. The tree would lose a branch every storm. I lose a branch here, branch there. Every storm, I realized that the tree was a problem. So I let the tree company decide if trimming was enough or should it just be removed, cut down completely. So they said, you know, it's an old tree, you might want to take it out. So I said, okay, take it out. And there were 2 trees. I was concerned with the tree that, the one that was behind my garage, that was taken down without any problems. It wasn't near any fences. The one that was near a fence, it was a tall tree, and as they were bringing it down, just as they brought the last piece down, it barely touched the fence, but it hit the fence enough that it knocked the fence down. And my intention was to put in a fence myself. My nephew and I, we like to do a lot of our own work. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to hire a company to do it or do it myself. So, and that's where I was going back and forth. I was trying to, that's why I never really resolved the issue with Bill. I wasn't quite sure how we were going to do it. And before I could decide...
Who caused the damage?
The tree company caused the damage. And they gave me a discount, and I was willing to...
The company you hired?
Yes.
Plaintiff William Cook is suing the defendant for damaging his fence. But the defendant insists he intended to fix the fence, and William sued him before he had a chance to.
So why are you confused about who is responsible for that?
And I was willing to pay for the fence.
Okay.
I brought the fence down. I'm willing to pay for it. I'm going to replace it anyway. Right. I just was unsure over if I wanted to do the labor myself or not, and that's where I never came to a decision. And that was my personal problem. I never made a decision on how I was going to do it.
You left the decision to me. You said, well, I'm just going to leave this.
Actually, that's when I was sued.
You knew he might take you here, and that you just said. Well, you got to make a decision. You didn't make a decision. You have to. Go ahead. Anything else?
I was procrastinating.
All right.
That was the problem. I
admit I was procrastinating yourself into court.
And Bill cut through the procrastination by suing me.
There you go. It depends on the length of that procrastination.
I'm still thinking.
1 day, 2 days, 3 days, yeah, 5 days even, yeah, maybe even a week or so. But you can't go past 5, 10 days after you damage somebody's property and not be able to commit to a particular plan of action. So I'm going to grant him his judgment now that you've made your decision, and I've assisted you with that decision.
Yes.
$1,324 is your judgment. Judgment for the plaintiff.
Thank you, Your Honor. What really got me, Jimmy, is the day that why I didn't know what you were going to do about the fence is when you came over to my house that one day and you asked me if you could dig my bushes up to plant in front of your house because they were doing damage on my walls. If I was your neighbor and I come over and I say, hey, I did a little research. Those bushes in front of your house are damaging your basement walls. Can I dig them up and plant them in front of my house? So then I thought, well, man, I got to go to court.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry about my procrastination on the tree. I would have eventually gotten around to it, but that was the issue, right? So, you know, I mean, I have no hard feelings.
None at all.
No hard at all.
Not
Things
at
have
all.
to get done, and things will get done, you know?
Yep.
But unfortunately, we had to come this far in order to come to this kind of an understanding.